Humans have a need for love. When we feel loved, we feel accepted, validated, connected. When I came across the opportunity to talk about sense of belonging, I recognized the feeling somewhere. And when reflecting on my life, I realized I had always tried to belong to one place, to a community, to a friend group, to a person. In other words, growing up, I was always searching for a connection, a validation, and maybe love. So it made me think, is our need for love linked to another need for belonging? I was born in England. Not long after, my parents had just immigrated from Spain. As a child at the time, even though I had only lived in England, I never quite felt like I was English enough. In fact, when someone asked me, "Where do you come from?" I'd say, "I'm Spanish and a little bit English." There are multiple studies that prove that belonging is normally tied to a religion, a community, a culture, to a place, or to a person. Like when we hang ourselves to that relationship that unfortunately is not quite working, but we feel loved, therefore we stay where we think we belong. In my case, in my early years, my family in Spain and my parents gave me the love and validation I needed. And when my visits to Spain consisted in jamón, fiesta, sun, party, how could I not call that my home, right? You see, my strong bond to my Spanish roots made me feel a deep sense of belonging that transcended any physical presence I had here in England. So what made me feel good at the time was that I was only 1% English, but 99% Spanish for sure. At the age of 6, my parents told me we were moving. And unfortunately for me, it wasn't to Spain. It was to Africa, more specifically Cameroon. In Cameroon, we settled in a small village in the northwest English region of the country. As a white family from Europe, you would think we were treated differently from the locals in the villages we arrived. But no, it was the place where my transition was the easiest, out of the few more to come. The community there embraced us from the first moment, and they made us feel like one of them, to the point that I never even noticed our differences, and after only a week, my accent was already Cameroonian. They became my family, my home, and it was the first time I had felt like this, while not in Spain. What I mean here is that my sense of belonging was well taken care of. I had found love and connection through a community far from home. But after 2 years, life took another turn. We were moving again, but this time to Spain. I was finally moving to the place I considered my true home. And as much as I loved Chisong, I was moving to a place where I could finally grow my roots and so feel like I belonged to one place. I had never attended a Spanish school before. And the transition from eating fufu and llama-llama to tortilla de patatas was indeed quite shocking at the time. In school, I was used to making brooms from scratch, to collect ripe coffee cherries from the plantation, as well as dancing and singing a lot. I had lived experiences like traveling Cameroon by horse with the Fulani tribe, and because of these amazing but very unusual experiences, I felt different from everyone. And different for me didn't mean a good thing. It meant being an outsider. It meant being disconnected. In my class, no one shared my background. No one had lived what I had. So I didn't want to be the only one. And it made me feel that I didn't belong to the one place I thought I did. While my Spanish was perfect, I could also speak English perfectly. And every time someone said, "Anna, you remember when?" Oh, you weren't there. It made me feel like I had missed all the fun memories they had, like my memories weren't good enough. So I believed that by trying to be as similar to them as possible, I would be able to establish a connection, right? So the best option was to adapt and become a chameleon. The same way a chameleon changes its colors to blend into its surroundings, I avoided talking English for years, to the point that I forgot the language. I avoided talking about my past or anything that made me feel different. This way I camouflaged myself to fit in and be accepted by everyone and so find my belonging. But spoiler, the harder I tried to fit in, the harder they'd push me out. Not long after, I was sat again in a sofa to be told, guess what? We were moving. But to another city, in Spain, where we thankfully stayed for 7 years, so I had the sufficient time to get rid of the chameleon. Here was the first place I started to say I was born in England. People would wow me. And the more I kept telling them about my life before Spain, the more it made me feel quite proud, unique, and very cool. In fact, it got to the point where I could not keep my mouth shut about it. And to this day, I've ended up doing a TED talk about this. Just when I felt at peak with my relationships, had many good friends, had achieved what I had craved for my whole life, had my family close. Teenage Anna, at the age of 16, decided to move to England. Long story short, I experienced a huge cultural shock when I got here. Different communities embrace newcomers in different ways, and I wanted to be welcomed the way I knew my community did it. We hugged, we were curious, we embraced, we invited, and none of this happened, and it's okay, but when our expectations fail to be met, shock and sadness comes to us. For me, with this shock, the horrible feeling of being different also came along. This time, I anchored my sense of belonging to my community in Spain. This way I couldn't get hurt, and I could manage not feeling accepted by this new community. So it didn't bother me if I wasn't making meaningful relationships, because I already had my amazing friends where I truly belonged. At university, I felt great again. I peaked. I found that people were all in the same position. We were all searching for love and connection, and I found it through amazing friends. But someone once told me that after a high always comes a low. For me, after the happy bubble of my first year at university, I found myself in a very low point of my life. I felt disconnected from everyone, but especially myself. In this low moment, I decided I wanted to live an experience alone, to prove not to anyone but myself how much I was capable of as an individual. So I traveled to the US for 3 months. The problem was, I wanted to introduce the true Anna to this place, but I wasn't quite sure of who I was anymore. I had tried to fit in into others and their world so much that I had forgotten about mine. I felt like I had lost myself in the way, or maybe I had never even allowed myself to just be me. My sense of belonging was therefore nowhere to be seen. And as much as I knew I had people by my side that loved and took care of me, I couldn't help it but to feel alone. And because I felt so alone, I felt disconnected. So I couldn't rely on a community or a place to find my belonging anymore. This time, the only person I had to rely on was myself. And I had never done this before. People always tell us to love and embrace ourselves, right? But it's not until we hit that low, until we no longer feel connected to ourselves or others, that we understand it. When we feel that there's no connection, we don't feel loved. Therefore, there's no feeling of being belonging. And I'm going to tell you the cliche sentence of that trip changed my life, because in a way it did. And it wasn't after I came back that I found comfort in my own company, in my own thoughts, in a slightly deep sense of belonging that transcended any physical presence I had here, or external circumstances. I became more authentic with myself, And I realized that my worthiness was not dependent on the approval of others. Me being different didn't make me less of a person, less worthy of connection. So without knowing, that time alone, just hanging out with Anna, I was cultivating a sense of belonging within myself. Which I don't know about you, but I didn't know that was possible. I still have a lot of learning to do in this journey called belonging, and that's why I don't want to tell you that sense of belonging can only be found within ourselves, because as seen in the example of my life, and like we all do it, we can find it through a community, or like we all do with our friends and our families. We are social beings at the end of the day. There are regions in the world called blue zones. Here people live within a tightly knit community for their whole lives. Researchers have found that people here reach the age of 100 or more, and this is possible because through their strong social connections, they establish a purpose in life, which contributes to their overall well-being and longevity. But not everyone can live within a tightly knit community for their whole lives, and so anchoring our sense of belonging to external circumstances is not durable. The one thing that we have for sure is that us, as individuals, are the ones who we'll be spending the rest of our lives with. So as we try to love and embrace every difference and uniqueness that makes us who we are, we will find ourselves no longer seeking that external validation, the approval of others. When we accept, acknowledge, honor our own experiences, thoughts and emotions, even the ones we may consider unworthy or undesirable, allowing ourselves to just be okay with who we are, we find peace and love and connection within ourselves, which equals, guess what? Finding our sense of belonging. Thank you.